On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
So we're simultaneously being told the world is ending, you need to do something, and take time for yourself. Remember to take a bath, take your magnesium, eat your protein. If you can become a little more savvy and realize that you're being served this certain content after they've made you angry, at least for me, that's made me a little more sane.
Hi, this is Phoebe Maltz Bovy. Welcome to The Jewish Angle, a podcast from the Canadian Jewish News. So I just reviewed the memoir Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams. It's this tell-all about Facebook, the company that is now known as Meta, along with Instagram. All these parts are now Meta. And Meta has taken legal action to block Wynne Williams from promoting this book. It's a lot of drama, sort of behind-the-scenes publishing drama there. But while I was reading Careless People, I just started to get this sense of deja vu. And I was trying to think why. And then it hit me that I'd read this book before, except that one was not a memoir. It was a novel, and more to the point, a satirical novel. And it was Leigh Stein's book from 2020, Self-Care. I did not love Careless People. I did love Self-Care, so I had to have Leigh Stein come on to discuss it. Leigh, welcome to The Jewish Angle. Consider me the Sheryl Sandberg of Canadian Jewish podcasting. So Maren Gelb, one of the protagonists of Self-Care, is a schlubby behind-the-scenes worker bee at Ritual, spelled Richual, which is a tech startup promising to, quote, catalyze women to be global change makers through the simple act of self-care, end quote. She's from Wisconsin. She doesn't come from money. And without overly spoiling things, whistleblowing comes with its challenges. Mm-hmm. So Leigh is also, I just want to say, she's the author of 6 books, including fiction, poetry, and memoir. She's also a cultural critic, writes the Substack newsletter Attention Economy. She is American, not Canadian, but I bought some Ontario-grown arugula the last time I was at the supermarket to offset that. So, but without further ado, I have to ask you, do you see this parallel between Self-Care and Careless People?
Well, I love that you made the connection. It's so funny because as I was writing Self-Care, writing the parodies of Tech World was one of the most fun parts of the book. There's parodies in there of Wellness World, and there's parodies of Tech World, including a 10-point manifesto that I invented for the company Ritual, which also has its own parallels to Facebook and Meta.
Does it ever? I was just rereading it. It's amazing.
We can read a few bullet points from that. But satire is the comedy of beliefs. And so anytime there is a rigid or a strict or even an inspiring belief system, it's easy for someone like me to get in there and kind of poke fun. So I think the narrative arc of Careless People follows this idealistic, diplomatic young woman from New Zealand, from a farming village in New Zealand, who's this company says it's going to connect us and change the world, and I believe. And so she is in a way like a heroine of a satirical novel who's caught up in this belief system, and then hilarity ensues when the hypocrisy of the company plays out on stage.
So what's so interesting is that when I was reading Self-Care, I felt that Maren, who's the equivalent character, was sympathetic, a sort of a troubled but sympathetic person. When I was reading Careless People, I found myself kind of questioning whether this narrative that Sarah Wynne Williams was telling was entirely on the up and up. Not that I think the specific stuff she's calling out about Facebook was wrong. It sounds like Facebook has done some not so nice things. But just like she presents herself as very sort of like bumpkin, aw shucks kind of thing. But then she also says that the Prime Minister of New Zealand knows her sister by first name. And then I'm like, wait a second. I just had some, but somehow like, so I guess what I'm wondering for you is like, is this maybe the type of story that's particularly suited to fiction or specifically satirical fiction?
Oh, that's so interesting. I was also thinking, I listened to an interview with Sarah to prepare for this conversation, and I was thinking like, I don't know if you agree, but I have so much skepticism and cynicism about tech world now in 2025. And so I wonder if it's like hard to even mentally remember the place we were in 2014, like that someone could have been so idealistic. Because I do think Marin, the fictional character, does believe that you can mix capitalism and social justice, as so many of these girl boss companies that you and I have talked about before tried to do. And so I think we have to kind of put ourselves back. We have to go back in time to understand what she believed and how she ended up doing this. But you think she's kind of obscuring her prestige and connections.
Or just sort of her, like what I couldn't figure out from her book. And I think you're right, though. And I think there is this question of where we were at in time. So I tried to do a little bit of timeline research for this and for my review. And basically, she started working at Facebook in 2011. The movie, The Social Network, came out in 2010. So there would have been already, like it was already in the air that Facebook wasn't just like this sort of do-good thing and that there was some like iffiness about it, but it would have been a different time in terms of like what you're saying with the girl boss capitalism. So I feel like there've been kind of also these eras with the, where there was kind of the earnest girl boss capitalism. Then there was the backlash to it. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell what drew her to Facebook because in Careless People, she uses a lot of this language that's very similar to almost sort of what Devon uses in Self-Care. So Devon is the more sort of Gwyneth Paltrow-y face of the company who speaks in a lot of kind of wellness jargon terms and sort of corporate wellness jargon terms. And some of what I got from Careless People seems sort of like, I wanted to work at Facebook because it was going to change the world. It was going to be a revolution. But I was like, but what? What did you want revolutionized? And I could not figure that out. But,
yeah, it's so funny. Yeah. At the end of 2019, the New York Times published this kind of retrospective of the last 10 years of the tech industry. And I clipped out of the physical newspaper this tiny segment by Nellie Bowles where she talked to the creators of Silicon Valley, the satirical TV show about the reception in actual Silicon Valley to the TV show. And basically, all these tech founders were like, your show is so funny because all these other companies talk about changing the world, but we actually want to change the world. So like they can't even see it. And I just clipped that out of the newspaper and like put it on my bulletin board. And I thought like, this is my goal. Like if I can get people in the world that I'm skewering to be like, what a funny book, then I've done my job. Like they really can't see it. Yeah. It's like once you drink the Kool-Aid, but also the money. I mean, how much money must she have been making?
Well, that was another thing that I wondered about because she talks about in the book, like why she couldn't leave. And there are some very sympathetic reasons, like she needed health insurance. At the same time, people leave jobs all the time. She would have been employable elsewhere. Also, she is from New Zealand. Her husband or partner or whatever is from England, and could have potentially lived somewhere with a different system than the U.S. Like if she'd really, like there were options. And I do wonder, like, it is appealing to make a lot of money, presumably. And even if she was not as wealthy as some of her colleagues, she was, but yeah. But what I wanted to ask you, though, about, like, there are just so many different angles for you. This is why I had to have you on for this. You've had an unusual professional relationship with both Facebook and Instagram, which are two parts of Meta, but as a user on these platforms. So do you want to do Facebook first? What's been your relationship with Facebook? How have you used it?
Yeah, so the origin story for Self-Care is that for 3 years, I ran a private Facebook community of women writers. We had 40,000 members, and I was so inspired by this online community that I started these conferences. So the Facebook group was called Binders Full of Women Writers, which was a play on Mitt Romney saying that he had binders full of women. We were the Binders Full of Women Writers. Mitt Romney is like a very wealthy conservative who ran against Obama in the second race. And at the time, this became a huge joke that to hire more women at his company, he had binders full of women. So this became a meme. In hindsight today in 2025, I can tell you, like, I would rather have President Mitt Romney than President. Like, I would vote for Mitt Romney tonight. But we don't live in that alternate reality. So I ran this private Facebook group. I started these conferences called BinderCon. And I read Lean In. The year I started this, I read Lean In. I remember exactly where I was. I was on the subway when I finished the last page. I looked at the author bio. There's the photo of Sheryl Sandberg. And in the bio, it says the proceeds from the book are going to go to the Lean In Foundation to help women. And I was so excited because I was like, we should get some of that money for our feminist nonprofit organization. I thought it was like a perfect fit. Also, we were on Facebook. It just seemed like such a no-brainer. So a member of my volunteer staff went to college with a guy who worked at Facebook, and we forwarded emails up the chain until we got to Sheryl Sandberg herself, and then we got a phone call with someone at the Lean In Foundation. I was so excited. And on this phone call, they talked to us about what they were doing, and what they were doing with all this money was partnering with Getty Images to create a portfolio of stock photography of girls and women in STEM. That's what they spent all the money on. And we asked if they would sponsor our conference, and they said that they would send us a PDF document about how to host a Lean In circle ourselves at our own conference.
Oh, boy.
I was very disappointed, but this was like a big sign to me that, like, there's something, it was all talk and no walk. Like, there was nothing really to back up the message in the book and the fact that all this money from this international bestseller was supposed to be helping other women.
So when you were on Facebook itself, what did your group, was this a positive and sort of like warm and fuzzy experience that made you feel like social media will be what connects us all and makes the world a better place? Was it uniformly like that?
Initially, I didn't start the Facebook group, The Binders. Another, actually a Canadian journalist started the group. It was invite only, and she thought 20 people would join because you had to know someone to get you in. But within weeks, there were 30,000 members. So it exploded. And at the beginning, it was a really positive place to be. And I was seeing all these connections being made. I was seeing like famous writers, famous journalists, famous novelists being like, hi, everyone. And it was so exciting that these prominent women were members of our group. People were connecting to literary agents. It was like very fruitful. By the time I left in 2017, it had been completely taken over by activists. It had become a place where public shamings were happening very often. There was a lot of women criticizing other women for talking about certain topics or using certain language. It had become a very oppressive environment to be. I almost feel like I was in a cult, but the irony is that, like, I was the leader. Like, I was the cult leader, but I didn't have any power. All the power was held by the members of the group. And so I decided to write a satire as a way to illustrate how women can destroy one another in the name of, quote, being good feminists. So they all thought that they were on the right side and doing social justice politics on Facebook, but to that end, they were just ruining each other's lives.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting because, I mean, for so many reasons, but one of them is that So Careless People has one of the really damning things about Facebook that's described in it that's more accessible. Like, some of the stuff has to do with, like, how they, like, dealings with Myanmar, and it's like, I don't know how you would deal with Myanmar. I'm not really qualified. But some of it is a little more accessible, though, which is about some kind of function where if a teenage girl seemed insecure and posted something in a way where she seemed insecure, they would feed her ads for beauty products.
Yeah.
Like Facebook would. And I think when people talk about the internet as toxic, and specifically like stuff on the internet or social media being toxic specifically to women, it's imagined to be sort of stuff like that. But it's also this thing that you're talking about of the kind of like using a space that's meant to be doing good to sort of sanctimoniously bully other people, which was really like a big feature of 2010's kind of social media.
And what I realized, I ran this group from 2014 to 2017. I wrote the novel from 2017 to 2019. So I started writing the novel at the beginning of the first term of Trump. And what I realized on Instagram is that there's this symbiotic relationship between feminist activists and the wellness industry. So being on the internet stokes our rage. We feel upset about injustices. We feel powerless to help. And then Instagram will serve us an ad for a 7-day detox cleanse or a jade face roller. So we're simultaneously being told, you should care about this. The world is ending. You need to do something and take time for yourself. Remember to take a bath, take your magnesium, eat your protein. So the internet feeds on both of these, and we're the victims of the messaging of both. And I think if you can just become a little more if you can become a little more savvy and realize that you're being served this certain content after they've made you angry, at least for me, that's made me a little more sane, or I'm able to joke about it at least.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
I just wrote about for the Globe and Mail the sort of Buy Canadian movement, which is a big thing here in Canada.
Yep.
On account of the tariffs and on account of the general threat you guys are posing. Although I'm also American, so I'm Canadian and American, so
you're a double agent.
I'm battling myself. Yeah, exactly. But something that just struck me about it is yes, there is an economic argument for doing this, but there's also this shopping as escapism. And it is more fun to contemplate going and instead of getting whichever crappy dress from H&M, I will instead get a $400 made in Canada dress, or at least look at them on the internet. I have definitely looked at these on the internet and not bought them, but whatever, I've thought about it. And, there's something escapist about it. And the fluffy stuff, it's appealing, the fluffy stuff. But yeah, I agree with you about the savvy. But I want to ask you about Instagram, because you did something very interesting to promote self-care using Instagram. Do you want to talk about what that was?
Oh, sure. So last year, as it was December 2023, so it was about to turn into January. And I thought, what is the month of January? The month of January is when everyone does dry January. They do their detoxes. They do their 30-day yoga. Everyone's getting ready for self-care and wellness. So what I did was I cleared my entire Instagram. I archived all my content, so there was nothing. And then I made this big announcement, and I told my followers I had decided to leave the book publishing industry and take a job at the women-led company Ritual. And very quickly, I got to see which of my followers had actually read my book. It was kind of like attending my own funeral. Because the people who had read the book got the joke right away and started playing along. And the people who hadn't read the book, including famous memoirist Danny Shapiro, said things like, the book publishing industry's loss is the wellness industry's gain. Congratulations, Leigh Stein. So I was getting a lot of earnest well wishes on my new journey. And my husband was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing for them. You should tell them it's a joke. And I was like, it's too soon to tell them it's a joke. Because I wanted to pull this prank for the entire month of January. So I thought, what could I do that would escalate the joke and make it even more obvious that this was satire for the people who didn't know? So my next post was about how privileged I was to work at a company where my employer mandated me to get colonic hydrotherapy. So then I thought surely people would know that this was a joke. But one woman who is an influencer commented and said, I'm worried about you. Are you in a cult? So I continued along by using Canva templates from the wellness industry. So I used these pink glowy photograph of a woman meditating in the sunset post to satirize the wellness industry and make jokes on Instagram. But these were so realistic looking that people were DMing me and saying that they were starting to get even more wellness ads than they normally got because they were engaging with my fake content.
Well, that's incredible. But I'm also thinking about the cover of Self-Care, which looks like it could be Glossier almost, you know?
Yes,
like,
it's like pink with a dark goop inside.
Like there's like this sick part of my brain that's like, I would consider clicking purchase on that skincare product.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, so it's very aesthetic. Yeah. It's very fun for me to just play and like skewer the aesthetics of the whole thing. But the joke was going on for a couple months, and I realized like I didn't know where it was going, but I needed to kind of conclude it. Like there needed to be like an end to the story. And so I filmed a video of myself in my car, like those TikTok videos where you see women all the time in their cars. Mm-hmm. I filmed a video in my car saying that I'd been called in by HR and I'd been let go from Ritual because I violated my employment contract by talking about my colonic hydrotherapy on my own social media. And in the video, I'm kind of outraged and I say, like, I'm an American. I have freedom of speech. Now, here's where Instagram and Meta, I have to say thank you to them because I had archived my entire feed, this was technically the first video I'd ever posted. And so Instagram rewarded me by sending this video like out into the universe to everyone. It ended up going viral. It was viewed 1 million times. And the comment section was filled with men letting me know that that's not what freedom of speech means and that I misunderstood freedom of speech.
I love it.
Which was just an absolute pleasure. I just had so much fun. It's the most fun I've ever had going viral.
So both self-care and careless people are about hypocrisy and about this sort of type of organization that sells itself as being about the greater good, but isn't living up to its professed values. And I get the sense that millennials are, or at least were, really into that, and that was something very much like of our generation. But we seem to have gotten to a place as a culture where there's less hypocrisy because there's less virtue signaling. And I'm wondering just sort of what is there to satirize now that the sort of, is it vice? Like, how do you satirize vice signaling, you know? Like, what can be satirized now?
That's so interesting. Yeah, I have a hard time, like, if I try to think about satirizing the right now in America, like, they already look like clowns. Like, it's hard to satirize clowns. You can only satirize someone that believes they're being virtuous as they're causing chaos and mayhem and making unethical decisions. So that is difficult. But your framing of the question is really interesting. Like, I guess who is presenting themselves as virtuous and righteous? Because that's where I would need to look to find my target. I mean, I can say my new book that comes out at the end of August is partly a Gothic suspense and partly a satire. And if you ask me what I'm satirizing in this book is the intergenerational misunderstanding. So the way millennials are afraid of Gen Z coming up to replace them, the way Gen X kind of defers to Gen Z because it's like, oh, the youth know everything, like maybe they'll save us. And what I think no one wants to be the adult in the room. Like Sarah Wynne Williams is saying, like, look at these, like these people were supposed to be the adults in the room and look at what they were doing. But you want to be like, Sarah Wynne Williams, you were the adult in the room. Like, no one wants to be like, oh my God, it's me.
So here's something that I have to ask you because it's the Jewish angle. So first is Maren Gelb Jewish? Because I Googled it, I looked again at the book and could not figure this out.
She's not Jewish. She actually has a Christian mom. There's a part where she goes to church with her mom.
Okay.
But I think I picked the wrong last name because you are not the first Jew to tell me that Gelb is a Jewish name. So I think I made a mistake when naming her. But she is not, unfortunately, she is not Jewish.
Oh, well, then forget this interview. Just kidding. But I wanted to ask, though, so a Hey Alma interview refers to you as the Jewish author, Leigh Stein. Do you consider yourself a Jewish author? This is a question that would be asked of Philip Roth, and he would say, no, I am an American author. Where do you see yourself fitting in this
well, first of all, I'm in my Philip Roth era. Like, I've only just started reading Philip Roth. I'm so into him. He's like my new fave.
Oh, yeah? Can you do book talk? Have you done book talk about Philip?
I've thought about it, and then I'm like, I don't think the audience for Philip Roth is on Book Talk, though I should probably just find out.
Yeah.
You could call me a Jewish author, though I guess I feel, I think I feel Philip Roth's reluctance toward being a woman author. I think I would have been proud to be a woman author in my girl boss heyday. But now I feel more like, why can't I just be an author? Like, why do I need that label? But I think Jewish author I like at the moment just because it feels it's a hard time to be a Jewish person in publishing. Like I have a lot of off the record conversations with writers and publishing professionals about like, who can we send books to? Like who's receptive to these books right now? Like it is a strange time to be Jewish in book publishing. So I'm very happy to be a Jewish author right now. And I will say the main character of my next book is Jewish.
Well, all the better, you know. No, but what I was going to ask you though about, and I know you said off the record conversations, but just out of curiosity, is it that these are books with like that are about Mideast politics, or is it just that the author happens to be Jewish or the characters happen to be Jewish, something like that?
Yeah, I would say like not books about the Middle East, but books about the Jewish American experience, which agents would be receptive to reading those, which editors are acquiring books by Jewish American authors. Like I pay attention to these things. When I get an email every day with book deals, and I see a lot of book deals for Arab, Palestinian American authors and subjects, and fewer. This is very general. This is just very anecdotal and general. Fewer book deals on Jewish American experience or topics at this moment.
Yeah, I've noticed as well that they're like, I used to think, they're just, so one of my roles at the Canadian Jewish News is reviewing books for Scribe Quarterly, the new print magazine. That sort of there was already a print magazine, but now it's been kind of reborn, but in a non-Jesus-y way because it is Jewish. But basically, one of my roles is that I, look to see what new books are coming out with Jewish themes, and it seems like there aren't a ton, and a lot of what there are like the Jewish reason to be an anti-Zionist or something like that, which I think all the more ideas, like I'm for maximal speech, like I want everything to be out there, but there doesn't seem to be help. Although what I would say, and this is another thing I was thinking about just and wanted to discuss with you, is I read and really loved Taffy Brodesser-Akner's book, Long Island Compromise. And that's extremely about the Jewish experience, the Jewish American experience. And I just was struck by how completely non-discussing stuff Taffy Brodesser-Akner has been on social media, and how kind of surprised I was by that, given like stuff she'd written
in the novel,
but also even like she wrote something, I think in like 2021 or something for Tablet that was about anti-Semitism. And that would probably today be considered very problematic. And she just now wrote this huge article that goes into exactly where she stands on all sorts of things, for, I don't know if it was the New York Times Magazine or for the New York Times in some other capacity. But what it made me think is that, like, I guess as an author strategy, I can totally get that you would want to just, like, not give fodder. You know what I mean? Like, if what you think might not be the thing, to just not post. But also there's something kind of, like, frustrating. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel a chill. I wouldn't say I'm the bravest person on social media right now, but there's definitely kind of a consensus or a group think about where one should fall on the war in Israel, and as a writer. So there's a kind of expectation of what one should post. And I would imagine maybe Taffy's like, well, I don't want to post that, but I don't know if I can post pro-Zionist content, for example.
Right. I mean, I don't know exactly what she thinks about Israel. Like,
I don't
that's
either.
Not really there. Yeah.
But it's like, there's like one kind of post that you post and you'll get celebrated for. And there's one kind of post you can post and lose all your followers. And so there's a third option where it's just don't post, don't say anything about it on social media.
Right. Yeah, that does seem to be an understandable, like if you're talking about authors and strategy, I could see that for me, it's completely different because I'm an opinion writer. So my opinions, I got to share opinions, even though I don't have particularly many interesting ones about geopolitics. But yeah, like I think if I were trying to do something that was more art than opinion writing, I would be tempted to just be like, I am only a novelist at this time. But I wanted to just sort of round things out a bit with like where things are now in internet culture, and has just has the action sort of moved more to TikTok? And this is, yes, definitely your opening to tell us a bit more about your forthcoming novel. If you're seeing this, It's Meant for You, which is available for pre-order. And I checked Amazon Canada. It's there too. So, yes.
Well, thank you. Well, to even bring it back to Sarah Wynne Williams, one of the most explosive parts about her book is all these allegations she makes about Facebook cozying up to the Chinese Communist Party. And she says that China is now Facebook's second biggest market at $18 billion, which was a little brain scratching for me to figure out because Facebook isn't even allowed in China, but the $18 billion comes from Chinese companies buying advertising. But it was interesting for me to think about this compared to TikTok. To me, this is even like a bigger scandal than TikTok. So there was, as people know, there was congressional legislation and then a Supreme Court case.
They may not know in Canada.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. They may
okay.
not know in Canada. So there was drama in the United States about whether TikTok should be allowed to operate in the United States. And Congress said that TikTok would have to sell to an American company or shut down. This went all the way to our highest court, the Supreme Court, and they agreed with Congress. But then President Trump got into office and presto changeo, we still have TikTok. So they have not been forced to sell to an American company, and they are still operational in the United States. Now, some people in the United States have been very worried that the Chinese Communist Party will have access to Americans' data, and that's why we want them sold to an American company. But what I was thinking about today, thinking about Sarah Wynne Williams' book, is I may be a naive idiot, so this may prove to be I'm completely wrong about this. But
unlikely, but go on.
When I think of the CCP having access to my TikTok data, that would be like them having access to my Netflix data. Like they would know what I watch and what I'm into. Like Leigh likes certain videos about this. I don't feel very scared by that. The idea that the CCP would have access to years of Americans' Facebook data, which is like so many personal connections and private messages and photographs. It's just such a volume of data that Americans have been posting for so many years. That to me is way creepier. And the fact that an American company has for years been trying to develop tools that would aid China in their machinations and in their censorship and in their surveillance, that to me is way more alarming than the threat of TikTok.
So Leigh, this has been just like absolutely delightful. I could keep asking you a million questions about internet and publishing and so forth, but I believe the time has come for you to tell me and our listeners to The Jewish Angle, where can you be found, your work? Where should people look?
I am mainly on Substack, leightein.substack.com, and Instagram and TikTok, if anyone's listening to this and is on TikTok. And my new book that comes out in August is about a 39-year-old woman who can no longer find work in the media industry because all the jobs are in social media. So she takes a job managing a D-list TikTok hype house of Gen Z content creators. She's way out of her depths, and one of the influencers has gone missing from the hype house, and that comes out August 26th.
Are you going to do a book tour?
I hope so.
I hope it comes to Toronto.
That would be amazing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leigh.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Jewish Angle, a podcast from the Canadian Jewish News. This has been Phoebe Maltz Bovy, opinion editor of the CJN and a contributing editor of Scribe Quarterly, the CJN's print magazine. The show is produced and edited by Michael Fraiman. Mark Weisblatt is the editorial director of the CJN. Our music is by Frank Freeman. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to The Jewish Angle wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.